It's not in the bank's best interest.
And it's illegal. We often talk about the roadmap. I want to talk about the road trip. How will AI disrupt ketchup, Lunchables, Kraft macaroni and cheese?
Everything is probabilistic for a founder. I think that's the other thing that it's hard for teammates sometimes to adjust to.
Irrelevant to me if Humane Pin works or doesn't work. It has unlocked a myriad of questions. As soon as we know that it is possible, right, then it becomes possible.
Welcome to episode 5 of 3 Course Founders, where we have deeper conversations with entrepreneurs who are building the future. Today, I'm talking to my friend Marty Ringlein. He is the co-founder and CEO of Agree. It's an all-in-one agreements platform that combines e-signature with automated invoicing, integrated payments, AI workflows. It's as if Docusign or Hellosign had a baby with Quickbooks and Stripe. Over 3 courses of coffee and food, Marty and I have fantastic conversations about everything from his unique view on how companies can disrupt legacy industries, the convergence of different industries, and how to combine theories that come from 2 completely different spaces, how great founders disrupt established markets. We then get into how to bring your team along as a startup founder in those early days where the roadmap is uncertain, wide-ranging, and the challenges and opportunities in internal communication at the early stage. And we wrap things up by talking about Marty's unique strengths and weaknesses as seen by his founder friends, and we even get into how AI might disrupt ketchup. If you aren't already subscribed, whether you're on YouTube or listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please do. Your support means a whole lot. With that, enjoy the show. Marty Ringlein, welcome to 3 Course Founders. Super excited to have this chat. We've chatted before about what you're building with Agree, which we'll maybe get into, but we'll stay adjacent to it most of this conversation. We want to dive into so much of what being a founder is, what being a founder has been for you. You've been a many-time entrepreneur, investor. You've been around the space of tech in multiple categories of size of business, of industry. But we always like to start these conversations a certain way, dive right into it, which is like the unique market insight. And you and I were chatting a little about this on the way in around what things exist in the world that wouldn't be recreated exactly the same way today if we were starting them from scratch. And in your business, and feel free to bring up the context of your business to kind of share this theory. But it's this really interesting thing of, I think, a lot of stuff we take for granted that it works the way it does for a reason, but it's the moment where, startup founder goes, actually, none of the things around this, as structured as they may seem, are actually helping us in modern society. So, unravel that theory for us or that thinking for us.
Well, and then you just made me realize, I think one of the things that separates founders from non-founders or great founders from first-time founders are these mental model constraints. Right? Like the world works in a very particular way, and it's always worked that way. And I think a classic founder mantra is like, oh, the way it's always been done isn't the way it'll be done tomorrow. So let's go fix it and bring it. Disrupt it is our word. But I do think we get very comfortable and like, oh no, that's how it's supposed to be done. It's like, well, raise our hand and be like, what if it didn't? And then I think the great founder has the answer to the question. This is the way you could do it. And then they push through and then they convince us all like, that's the way the world needs to work now. And so there are times where anybody who's over the age of 30 will have remembered this moment at some point in your childhood or young adulthood. You're in a grocery line and you're trying to get through quickly. And there's somebody, generally speaking, older, who's sitting there and they pull out this piece of paper and they pay with it, right? A checkbook. And they're holding up the whole line. And you're all kind of wondering, like, are they still using checks? But like, why was that the way we did it? Why is the way they think it's the most secure way to do it? Which is like ridiculous now. Because if I asked you, hey, on camera, give me your account and routing number to your bank, you'd be like, Marty, no. Yes. And I'm like, what do you think was on that check that they handed to the cashier? Right? Account and routing number. It's like, that's just the way we did it. And then we don't do it that way anymore. And then we get credit cards and then we get Apple Pay.
That small moment, I want to double click on it because it's like the moment where all now these fintech solutions that do like integrated banking and payment, you'll notice that when you put in the routing number, it'll auto enrich the bank. So we could technically search for the bank if every fintech company or every financial services company decided, okay, there's a way for us to make sure you're not going to route to the wrong bank. We'll let you search by name because it's going to be Bank of America or it's going to be First Republic. But we use the routing number still for reasons that probably don't need to be true anymore. It could be a search. And maybe there are reasons that like a number means you're not going to two similarly named banks, and so it's a little bit more secure that way. But that's a good example, right? I feel like.
Yeah. Well, and I just, I might say like, well, why do we need account and routing numbers? And someone on the other side of this camera is going to be like, well, there's security reasons or compliance reasons. Somebody in 2008, wrote a white paper that said like, hey, what if we didn't need banks, right? Then you get like cryptocurrencies and you get Bitcoin. It's like, okay, I'm not going to say that, we need to adopt, go that crazy and radical, but I do think we should be allowed to raise our hand and say, do we need JP Morgan? Right. Seems kind of ridiculous. The world's biggest bank, helps power the World Bank. Like, maybe we need JP Morgan, maybe we don't need JP Morgan, but I want to think like, how will Bank of America change tomorrow? How will some of these neobanks that may or may not survive, but how will their disruptions impact things in the future?
Let's zoom in a little bit on the notion of where this exists in finance and payments, where you're going to be disrupting things with Agree over the next couple of years in a big way. How we pay for things with credit cards and debit cards, ACH and wires. I talked a little about invoices. Seems broken. Identify a few of the like fun facts or like ways in which you view those things that you would say, hey, here's how to trivialize the system, or think about it only exists this way because it used to exist this way.
I mean, I'll do a few, but let's just get like really radical. And then it's one of those ones where you need to hear it for it to be obvious. And then once it's said, it's like, oh, that was so obvious. But I love the Uberification of things. So this idea that like I get in a car, a service is rendered, and I just walk out.
Yep.
Like that's just magical.
Yep.
There was no communication, there was no bartering, there was no change, there was no exchange of any account routing, credit card numbers, or nothing happened. No Apple Pay. It disrupts Apple Pay. Like that's wild to me. Like that's two steps ahead. Now I want that for everything. I want to go into a restaurant. I want to sit down. I want to eat my meal, and I want to just walk out whenever I'm done. I don't want to have to like, hey, check please, figure out the tip, all that kind of stuff. I just want it to all have magically work. So I think about that, and I think when I go 30,000 feet up, this idea of like push versus pull. This idea in terms of payments, like this idea that like, I had to give you the payment, cash, check, credit card, and that's, me pushing it, or you just magically pulling it from my account.
Moment is a pull.
That's right, yeah. And so this would be, we're starting to see it pop up. I think
versus a yellow cab would be a push.
That's right. And then like Stripe's getting really good at this, where Plaid does this, where you can connect your bank, right? Like, so hey, instead of doing check, right, when I wire information like my account routing number, now when I just connect my bank, I think it's to your point. And that's the way they work. And you brought this up earlier. I connect bank, I say Bank of America, right? And then I give it my credentials, probably username and password, or it pulls up Bank of America and I log in there. I'm connected. And then I can just start sending things, and then I could get it.
What's funny about that is like the realization that everyone in tech has about Plaid was and this was a controversy at some point, but like they were hijacking login and auth flows to do this. So they were essentially doing what
some of what they were doing was like illegal.
Right.
We'll get there with like the founder, because this is what I think makes founders great is because I heard talk to somebody at Capital One, and they were like, they had this line that I'll never forget. I almost want to like get it tattooed on me. Yeah. You can't break things in a bank. And I was like, that's why, like, I don't disagree with her statement, but like, that's why founders exist, because they're going to go break things, right? For better or worse. And then, because what Uber
did. It's not in the bank's best interest.
And it's illegal, right? Or
Right.
It's gray.
Right.
And the bank is going to be more conservative.
Right.
And the founder is going to be a little bit more liberal. And so Airbnb and Uber, when they first launched, it is gray. And so it is subjective, where one state says, hey, this is illegal, the way you're operating. It's like, well, the way you're reading the law, it's illegal. The way I'm reading the law, it's legal. And so they have to go to court to figure it out. And there's a big battle for a decade. Now, I think we're all happy we live in a world where even if you don't like Uber or Airbnb, or you don't like the fees or whatever it might be, surge pricing, you like that the construct of the service exists. And then you're hopeful that someone will build
someone like me who likes hotels better, pushed hotels to think differently. They're struggling to, but it still gave them a shot.
But the gig economy comes out of this. The idea that anybody can take any kind of asset or deprecated asset, or the creator economy comes out of this, right? A bunch of people end up becoming kind of landlords and start making their own economic sort of advantage using like, rental income in like a new way. So it's like, okay, so there's a lot of things that, derive from this.
Well, and it's that moment where the founder essentially says, I can hijack the system too, because in the Plaid example, the funny part of it is those founders are messing with the pull pay system, not by changing a pull push, not by making things pull or push, but by saying, that already exists if I could just log into your bank account. So we don't need to go create the rails for push or pull or whatever we want to do. We just need the user to give us auth, because then we as Plaid will allow other people to pull and push as they want. And so, again, in that founder modality, and I love this idea that you're bringing up of like, this is often thinking beyond that limitation, right? A lot of people, I think, will go, okay, I can't achieve that unless I build the infrastructure for it. It's like, okay, what's the proxy? There's some proxy way you can do it to test first. And I assume Plaid eventually went and got all the partnerships and does it cleanly now and integrations. But first they said, okay, what's the way I can have a proxy for the thing I think should exist, hijack the system in a positive way, hopefully in a way, I judge certain companies for going too far and some that I think don't go too far and do it well, but elegantly modify that system into what you want it to be, and then create what you want. Okay, tell us what else are examples of these? It only exists in financial services because of old ways of doing things.
One of the things I think that's odd is that I think from a consumer perspective, we don't really understand like what is the difference between like why do some people take credit cards and some people only take debit cards, and there's some actual reasons why when like you're putting a hold. So there's a reason why that's different. But for most of us, other than like the rewards or the points, like it doesn't really matter other than one's accruing debt and one's not.
Well, a really interesting portion of this is, so I'm I think we have slightly different views on this, if I remember correctly, but like I'm very skeptical and anti-Web3 as a general principle. Okay.
But you are anti-Web3 or you're skeptical of people who are anti-Web3?
No, I'm anti-Web3.
Okay.
And I'm skeptical of Web3 itself. And, but one of the things that's interesting to me is this notion of, it goes back to your whole idea of like these things allow us to ask questions that we weren't asking before, because one of the things I would always say to people would say, oh, it enables payments. And I go, hold on. The international portion of like no record or allowing international transactions to happen might bypass tariffs or what do you call it when you suppress a country? You don't want money to move. We did Russia sanctions, so you don't want money to move, outside of the realm of sanctions. I think that's a good thing. I think countries should protect how money moves. I think we should be able to have, let's call it a pseudo-political construct around, money movement. But the thing I would say to crypto founders, for example, at the time, who are arguing with me about, okay, what about in the US and all this other stuff? Okay, you still have an idea. I still want to be able to move money faster. You're right. It is ridiculous, and I don't understand what a wire and an ACH is. And so that allowed, I think, me to go, okay, yes, I still want something different. I might not want what you're offering, but there's still something clearly wrong with how it works today. And I think that's often true of like, a startup will come along with maybe too radical of an idea or too big of a switch. And whether it's that startup or another one that like pulls it back a little bit and says, wait, hold on, let me make it practical for folks. Let me bring back some of the stuff that exists within the system or modifies the system rather than is entirely new. I think that's something that like is a positive in a lot of these cases.
Well, I think that's the word, positive, because I again, from a founder's perspective, I fundamentally believe, this is the hill I'll die on, you have to be an optimist. You can't be a pessimist. You have to, because there's so many things that launch, and I like to make fun of them when they launch, and I like to poke fun. It makes for good engagement. The more negative you are on Twitter, the better the engagement, so that's unfortunate. But like the AI pins, like the Humane Pin and Limitless, Pendant, other ones, they seem just like overtly silly to me. This idea that like, as soon as they're like doing like, oh, there's an interface on my hand. Like my first thought was, because I spent 20 years UI UX, is like, that's not going to work in sunlight. Now, like the number one negative review.
Someone who has one, it also doesn't work outside of sunlight. Just FYI.
But like, so one, like, yes, I want to be like, I was right, I was smart, I said it was dumb from the beginning, and now it's dumb. And if it had taken off, I just would delete that tweet, right? No, but the optimist in me is like, hey, irrelevant to me if Humane Pin works or doesn't work. It has unlocked a myriad of questions that I wasn't capable of even asking myself because I had been locked into these predetermined mental models. And some of them are like beyond, like, they said, hey, this is going to replace the iPhone, right? Whether they're right or wrong, I don't care. What I like is 2024. Yeah, I think we're sometime between now and 48 months of like, someone's going to replace the iPhone. And now I want to know with what, and will it be Apple or will it not be Apple? So I like, because
this is V1 of a laser ink display. What do V2, 3, and 4 of a laser ink display look like? And could there potentially be something with this sunlight problem or not?
Yeah.
I love this concept. I wonder if you like the thing I've termed for it. because I have thought the exact same thing as you. These products are ridiculous. They're janky. I have a Rabbit. I have a humane device. They're now just sitting there useless. And
we're the early adopters.
We're the early adopters. And I think that these are, I'm referring to as imagination agitating products. They really push us to think differently about what could be built. The flaw is the marketing and the companies behind them investing too much in, this should be mainstream, let me sell it to you, let me have a Steve Jobs-esque presentation. And I think that's on the founders for mistaking how they should go to market. That's on us as users, not you and I. We probably would have recommended they go something differently, but like people are demanding too much of these early products. That's on their investors for not warning them. That's on the media for demanding too much of them. Like everybody is participating too much in like, if you release something, it should be this big thing. If they had quietly said, here's like our first 100. And by the way, we're not going to talk about it until it's stellar because it's imagination agitating. And that's fantastic for early adopters like us. We want to buy the bad versions of these things.
And that's the only place I get really agitated is it paints a harder uphill battle, a picture that makes it a harder uphill battle for founders because you lose the public's trust. When you come out with this big, bold statement. Now, I love big, bold statements. I love visions, but like, that's kind of like, you sell that to your VC if you're fundraising, right? Like you don't take that to the market and tell the whole world that this thing's ready, or you don't build Devin and say like, oh, you'll never need an engineer again, right? Or even like, I think like GitHub's Copilot is amazing and beautiful, but I just feel like some of the language they used was a little too strong. Like
Which is funny because they didn't need to, right? If you think about Devin, I like that product, even when I've seen like the raw demos or GitHub Copilot, where like it truly has been the fact that we have a lot of AI written code now. So like that's worked. And so if you just went with those simple statements, I don't know who at companies nowadays, and startups and big companies for some reason, are all opting into, let's have the gaslighting number rather than the real number. Like, it's the same thing we started to do. I think this is a different topic, but I feel like this is something that you probably will agree with me on. I feel like this needs to be a change we all make as founders. Landing pages in like the mid 2010s started to get really fake. Like the logos weren't real customers, they were LOIs. And the numbers of like users were just users who like entered the first email in your sign up flow, but your sign up flow is secretly 7 steps and all of them dropped off before step 7. And when the landing page started to do this thing where it was no longer a representation of reality, that I think was the first entryway into what now is, oh, I'm going to make this big, bold statement of you're going to be able to use the Rabbit to order an Uber, but that actually is probably not going to happen for the next 12 months, by the way, because we can't figure it out exactly like we thought.
And a lot of things changed around that time period, because that's also the emergence of like direct to consumer, influencer marketing. We're buying more things on Instagram now. So like, what really is the difference between a Casper mattress and a Purple mattress? Like they're probably manufactured in the exact same factory, the exact same way with the exact same materials, but like it's brand, like what's the difference between Brook Linen, linens and another one that you buy at Macy's,
Are we
right?
secretly lying to each other all the time? With like the way you manifested this just now with your mattress example is like we're just lying to each other with branding, because I believe in brand generally speaking. I think it's like a useful thing. I think people want to have affinity to like, oh, here's how you're selling me on what I want in my life, but when we get to this point where maybe there are 7 different mattress companies or 19 of them selling the exact same product they buy from the same exact manufacturer at completely different price points and with completely different marketing and value propositions, does it become toxic?
It feels sometimes in some places like, well, Brook Linen I'll use as an example, because when you buy a great name, sounds like Brooklyn, seems cool and hip. And it's like, oh yeah, I want cool and hip sheets. I don't know why I think I want that, but that's what I want.
When you say it like that.
Yeah. And then, but like when you get them, you see that like they come out of the package and there's the Brooklyn label. And then under it's like the real label, right? Like discount sheets LLC out of like Shanghai. It's like, okay, like now they just put a thing on top of a thing. So then I think that, erodes a little bit of trust. But then there's other ones, coming back to technology, like 8 Sleep.
Right.
Like that's a great brand, but that's not just a brand, right? That's a technology, and like they are doing things that are different. And again, at the end of the day, you could make a quip and you could be like, oh, that's just a modern waterbed. That's how they do it, right? It's just water in this material. But this idea of like cooling and heating, this idea that like you get better sleep, like these are all questions that I want to ask.
User experience things that even sometimes they might not even be a technology difference, but they might suggest you use things differently. Yeah. And I think even that is valuable a lot of the times. A brand might be suggesting, actually, I'll give you the exact same coffee cup, but I'm going to tell you to use it very differently. I think even that has financial value or like a consumer value too. But yeah, it goes back to like, at least have that. But if all you're doing is selling them the same thing and putting something else on top to hide what was a logo before,
But full circle, what I love are startups in general that get me to think differently, that break down old mental models. And I would say, like, if any founder were looking for advice, like, that's what you really want to do, is make sure that you're never yourself like locked into a mental model, that something has to work a certain way. Because I love when we can just ask questions like, why? I want us to be like an annoying toddler. Why? Why does it do that way? Why does it work that way? And what I really implore people, and this is the hardest one, is like, anytime you're frustrated, like when you're in the back of the line and you see someone paying with check, I want you to think for a moment, like, what's the business behind that? Like, how would you disrupt that, right? Like 20 years later, we get Apple Pay. And that's awesome and amazing. Or people are paying with their watch, but like there's a business to be had there. So like, just look around for when you're annoyed and you're irritated and you're like, I wish it didn't work this way. Like it might be on you to fix that, right?
Change it.
Yeah.
The add-on to that I want to say is also find out why, because sometimes you might find either there is a real blocker or more opportunity. So for example, when you see that person writing the check, don't just go, I think that should be better. Also investigate really, why is that the way it is today? What are the things that either increase your excitement about how you could change it or change how you think you can change it? And I think a lot of founders who go the wrong way and often again kind of encounter way too much friction and are surprised by it, it's because they didn't decide to be a little bit humble in the moment and actually investigate. So investigate after excitement, and don't fear that. That doesn't mean you're going to be less excited afterwards. You might be even more excited. Before we wrap the course, I do want to zoom in on Agree for a second, and the notion of the way in which you think the world of contracts and payments intertwining shouldn't be as it is and has opportunity to be better encapsulated. Give us a little bit of that behind the scenes on the product of like, what two things, I have a cheat of, you've already told it to me and it always has resonated so much. What two things do you think just don't relate to each other in the right way today?
I just thought it was silly. This is one where, I think great founders are their first customers, right? Like, solve your own problems. And so we're spending most of our time after 2019 on the investment side. And so we're writing checks, we're investing in companies. And the standard protocol is you pitch, I'm in, you send me some legal docs, I sign, I send them back, you sign, we both get signed copies. Then later you're like, you owe me money. You said you're going to invest, right? And so I always thought like, oh, well, that disconnect's super weird to me.
Yep.
Because the thing I signed, it kind of is like, there is no rent and lease agreements are like this. But for investment docs, there's no invoice. There's no purchase order. It's like, no, you signed the thing, now pay.
There's an obligation.
Right. And so I kind of felt like, oh, why none of these e-sig platforms like a Docusign, PandaDocs, Hellosign, EchoSign, any of the signs, like, why is there no like next step? Why is the finale of the relationship with us and that software the signed document? Like, we're not done. Like, just because you sign, I need the money, right?
When the money, just getting started.
Yeah, that's right. When the money hits, we're done. Yeah. So I'm like, why? I just want an email from Docusign that says like, one more step, right? Even if they don't do the payments, just tell me that there's something to do. Because they have all the data, or they should have all the data because it lived in the contract that they processed. And so that frustration just kept building and building. But that was one of those ones where like, it seems so silly. But to your point earlier, we had to ask why. $12 billion company, 22 years old, invented basically e-signature on the backs of the E-Sign Act in like 99. And so like, there got to be some smart folks over there, right? They're not all silly. So like, okay, why did they not do this? What's so hard about this? And then we realized, a lot of it, most of the thing, and I think this is where disruption comes, it's kind of like for venture and founders, it's the why now moment. It's like, oh, okay, something's changed over the last 22 years. Like, to move money, the thing I want to do, right? I want, when we're done signing, I want someone to pay the SaaS agreement, pay the rent, pay the investments. That's gotten a lot easier. Like looking like and acting like and facilitating like a bank, but not being a bank. That's a very common thing within fintech now. We call them neobanks. Your Mercuries, your Brex, your Ramps, they all kind of do this. And but 22 years ago, it would have been really hard for Docusign to be a bank, right? And so now,
it's already hard enough 22 years ago to do a digital signature as opposed to wet signature.
Nobody wanted to sign back then. Right?
You made this point to me of
scary.
like they were good then. That why now thing, like. They did do the thing. They're not like this company that hasn't changed the world. It was just they changed it back then. Yeah.
And so now if I want to disrupt that space, I don't need to convince the world that signing on with e-signature is better than pen and ink. Thankfully, they spent hundreds of millions of dollars over 22 years convincing the world. So I get to piggyback on that. And then I don't have to stand up a bank. I can build with a partner bank and I can move money and like I can do that. So now I can do all these things I wouldn't have been able to do before. But it means like the thing I'm frustrated about, I can go solve it. And so that's where we just kept chipping away at it. We're like, okay, I think this isn't going to be that hard. And then there's another why now moment. It's like I'm a big believer, and I'll kind of end here with technological convergences. I tend to think, and this is the way we'll look at making investments. It's never like one thing. It's never like, hey, this thing was invented or this thing happened. It's usually two or three things coming together at the exact same time, at the exact same moment, like that enables this really big disruption. The easiest example is the iPhone. It's not Steve Jobs' introduction of the iPhone in 2007. Is subjectively a better device than the BlackBerry, but like I will just say subjectively, it's 2008, the second version of the iPhone, because what happens with that version, it's off of the Edge network, and everyone, again, under 30 is gonna be like, what's Edge? Really slow internet. If you think your iPhone's slow now, it was horrible back then, but it gets on 3G, like it's like 100 times faster. So you get a supercomputer in your pocket on a 100x speed internet connection from what it was before. And you got this thing called an app store, which enabled billion-dollar businesses to seemingly come out overnight. There's no Uber without really fast internet and without an app store on a supercomputer in your pocket. Like we kind of forget that. Like there's no Square without those three things. You can't have every taco truck on any corner in all of Manhattan take a financial transaction at that moment until all these three things come together. So I'm constantly looking like, what's the convergence? And so one of the ones, and this is where most founders will be right now, AI. So how does, and I would say like, it's not about being an AI company, but AI today in 2024 is like the introduction of the internet in 97 going into 99. If you're going to start something new, like you can't not be on the internet, and you probably need to be like internet first. Like brick and mortar is not the way to start. So in 2024, you don't have to be an AI company, but like there better be a reason why you're using the technology to scale quicker, be more efficient, deliver a better product. And for us, we can scan and parse contract data much better with higher levels of accuracy and efficiency because of generative AI. Now, you could always have done it before with something called OCR, but like now with on top of, it's so much.
Well, and not to get into chilling of you too much, but the other thing that I think is underrated about that I've chatted about, the idea of doing that, whether you would have done it with OCR or with AI, the idea that you're going to take a more programmatic approach, for me, that word meant a lot when you used it in the context of the business, because when you said Docusign should understand what's in the contract because they just help process it, but they don't. Yeah. And that's not going to be something they think about, or at least until you force them to. And that too, on top of everything you just mentioned, is you taking a lot of pieces that need revisiting and revisiting.
Yeah, well, because I look at so we're in New York right now, and everyone's always talking about rent. Is it going up? Is it going down? And whenever they cite data sources for what is the average rent in one of the boroughs, say Brooklyn, I'm just shocked that the reference isn't Docusign. Every one of those leases, I'm going to say 99% of those lease agreements were done on, Docusign should be able to tell us as of 37 seconds ago, right? The average rent in the 11215 zip code was $3,468.32, right? For a 1-bedroom, 1-bath. They should be able to tell us that right away. But they're from an era that's pre-AI, pre-big data, right? 22 years ago is a long time. They have a new CEO now who comes from Google, comes from the ad space. So I'm willing to bet that quip I just gave on data is that's probably the only thing he's focused on,
right.
Which makes sense. But that's also now from a founder's perspective, that's my advantage because he realizes, just like all of us, because now that I said it, you're all like, well, that's super obvious. It's yeah, but until I said it, it wasn't really that obvious that DocuSign e-signature should be in the data capture, data insights game. But now that it is super obvious, they're going to be so distracted on that. It's like money movement's going to be even further from their roadmap. So it's like, okay, that's kind of cool. I also want to have that data capture, data insights layer. But let me go build the thing I know that isn't going to be a top priority because this one is such a big one.
I have to tell you, as a finale here, I agree. Awesome. On to the next one. All right, Marty, we are into course 2. We've got delicious food in front of us. Paul and Jimmy's Restaurante. We've snuck in a few bites already, so we can already vouch. Yours delicious?
It is amazing. It's
Mine
very
also
good.
delicious.
Yeah.
People will see as we eat, we are not lying.
I will be coming back.
Yeah, exactly. Course 2 is mutual founder therapy. There are topics that I think just don't get discussed enough because most other podcasts, most other interviews with tech founders, it's about the business, it's about the recent fundraise, it's about the go-to-market challenge. So I want to get into things that aren't those things. What's the vulnerable, kind of founder weakness, problem, challenge that whether you've already solved it or you're still trying to address it, that we can talk about, we can have some mutual therapy over.
Yeah.
Even though neither of us are licensed.
Well, to say, we'll probably get into some real big, deep stuff. But the one I'll start with is kind of a little bit of like a interview cheat where it's like, hey, what's a weakness that's really a strength? But it's something that I've, over the years, have realized I'm really bad at, and it causes problems, and I need to get better at it. And I just knowing myself, being self-aware is important. I'll never truly solve it, but I'll identify when it's happening, and then I'll get in front of it. And what it is I have to, just by the nature of the job, one, starting my career as a designer and now being on the investment side, being on the founder side, you're constantly in a game of sales, right? Sales to close a customer, sales to recruit somebody on your team, sales to fundraising from an investor. And so to do really good sales, you have to paint a vision, right? Because usually you're selling something that doesn't exist yet, right? I'm going to build this company. I'm going to make this product. I'm going to release this thing. And so I've already done a ridiculous amount of work figuring out what this thing is, and then all of the minutia to get there. And this is excruciating amount of attention to detail. And I'm on board with this.
You're very aware of every nuance.
But the pitch would be, it would take way too long. It'd be way too boring if I articulate it all. So what do? I just focus on the end game.
You have the high level. You have the abstraction.
And I tend to think now, 20 years in, I'm pretty good at it. And people get excited and they buy in. And they're like, yeah, let's do it. That makes sense. We're in. We're investing.
Here's the check. Yeah, exactly.
Problem is, as we start building, you might have a question. Why are we doing it this way? Why are we going down this path instead of that path? And I will forget to bring people along. I will forget to say, oh, I understood that like I'm ending here, but I had not explained all of the important milestones to get there and the reason why taking these actions in this particular order, why the order of operations matters for us to get where we want to get. And I've seen that cause conflict between my own co-founders, between my own team members. And when I see, because generally I'd like to think I'm like a likable guy, pretty decently easygoing. So when I notice the conflicts there, I now am mature enough to be like, oh, time out. I think you're reasonable. I feel like I'm reasonable. There has to be a good reason why the conflict is existing. Let me just pause and stop. And I'm usually like 90% certain, oh, I know what it is. I'm being a bad communicator. I didn't bring you along for the ride. So let me go back. And I'll end with this one. But when we talk about building companies, or we're really talking about building products and doing it iteratively, we often talk about the roadmap. I want to talk about the road trip. Like you and I, hey, I got an idea. You want to go to Atlantic City? There's this really great restaurant or this hotel. I was like, Marty, I'm in for a trip to Atlantic City. How are we going to get there? Like,
right.
Are we going to rent a car? Are we going to take a subway? Like, are we getting on a blade? And is there a helicopter thing here? Like these will matter, right? And so, like, I want us to know that like the trip from here to Atlantic City or to Philadelphia, that in itself is going to be a part of the journey, and it's going to be fun, and it needs to be fun, right? Like sometimes the road trip's the best part.
The mutual part of this is very mutual, and there are a couple of things I'm curious if the way they manifest for me or the way I feel about how the road trip gets missed is similar for you. Sometimes I assume people know, and that's just like kind of a weakness that we sometimes have of, isn't this obvious to you, or haven't I said it once and therefore you as my teammate or my investor, whoever, should know this already? So that's one mistake.
Well, on the communication side, it seems kind of condescending to be like, oh, is this obvious, right?
Let me like
obvious
actually,
to me. Or when I say it's obvious to me, it's like I'm an oracle or I'm a genius. No. I've just spent like 2.5 years before I brought you onto the team thinking about this. That's why it's obvious to me. Yeah, and it's not that like in chess, like I'm 4 moves ahead because I'm a genius. It's that I had just spent a I had fit in
because
a
you've
healthy
been 4
amount of time
moves ahead on this
Yeah.
particular problem, right?
Yeah.
That's a real thing.
Yeah.
But it's hard, to your point, it's hard to not feel like you might accidentally embarrass or patronize somebody in that moment. So that's one. Great. Okay, we have that one in common. Because again, I feel this in a lot of ways. The second one that I often have a feeling around is some of these are distracting details. Like, I don't want you to lose focus on what you're focused on as my team member, let's say. And so by shifting the focus, actually, it's better for me to concentrate here, for other teammates to concentrate here. I make the mistake of not educating you about why we're doing this adjacent thing that you might not even be involved in. Therefore, you're getting even less information. You're not only not aware of why we're doing it, I'm not exposing you along the way to how it's going. Is that something that's often happening to you?
Yeah, and the thing I find too is we gotta take a step back. And sometimes I think we forget, like, why are we here?
Yeah.
Right? We were just talking a minute ago about these problems that we see and these abilities for us as founders to go solve those problems, right? Using technology or convergences of innovation. But it's like, no, at the end of the day, there's a consumer base, a customer that shares this problem, right? And they share it at scale, right? And because the problem is bigger than you and I, we can build a business around the problem, okay? So let's start there. It's like, okay, now we have a customer, we have to service a need, right? And they have needs, desires, and wants, and we have to understand those. And then we have to go build a product that's gonna service that need and solve this problem, right? And then we have to build a team that's gonna build that product. And we have to remember all this. And so at some point, it is gonna seem a little weird where I'm like, hey, like, you want to collect a salary, or you really like your health insurance, right? And then that's expensive. And so we need a profit, and we need revenue, and we need a customer, and we need a product, and I need a differentiator, and I need a feature, and that feature needs a whole bunch of like tiny little components. And so
it needs a brand.
Yeah. And this thing right now, in this moment, in this conversation, might seem insignificant to you. And it's because I did a really bad job of telling you, yes, on its own, it is insignificant, but it is a very vital piece of a puzzle where if it doesn't fall into its slot along with everything else, the whole house of cards comes crawling down. So when we do this, and we do it right, and we do it in this order, the plan is we take over the world.
When I'll share the opposite but similar vibe of that, and you and I were talking about this earlier, of like when I had to do a layoff, in that moment I articulated that actually the best. Because at that moment, a founder is pressured to like feel, how do I allow the team to try to avoid this moment? Can I empower them and enable them? And it's in that moment that I think, at least for me, I got really good at articulating like, well, I really want to pay your paycheck, and I really want you to have healthcare. I want you to have a long career here, and I want you to be the one to solve these problems with me. However, to do that, I don't have infinite money somewhere to do it, and so it's not my virtue that allows me to do it. It's all these steps. And so let me work backwards to tell you how your steps with me or on some part of this journey can, work upwards to enable our business to continue to do the thing that you want it to do any given day, which is also support you as a human being. But it's hard to articulate that. It's very difficult to articulate that any given day, unless your back is up against the wall.
Yeah. Or just like, why do certain things matter? Like I just talked about profits and revenues and customers' willingness to pay, pricing strategies. All these things are important, but we built a company that we had sold to Eventbrite, and at Eventbrite they had a really interesting model where I think it's like 92% of Eventbrite events are free events. Backyard birthday parties, barbecues. And you're like, well, you don't make money on free, right? You can't take we could take 100% of free, we still get zero, right? So why would you do it? And what we don't, those 8% right, that pays the salary. But those 8%, when you look at how they got to throwing an event on Eventbrite in which they charged a ticket for, which Eventbrite took a percentage of, and that's how we all got our health insurance. They were the attendees of a free event, right? And so it's kind of hard to bring someone back and say, hey, doing a thing that makes no money is really important because it's gonna have this trickle effect, which will make us a whole lot of money. And so sometimes you have to remember that your business model isn't just for the finance team, isn't just for your investor, but you gotta figure out how to let the team know that there's a plan.
Such an underrated thing that I think we don't do enough of in tech is take the time to work all the way backwards, especially for young teammates or inexperienced teammates, and go, here's all the mechanics behind what we want to work here.
Thinking through like these moments where something's important, but you don't bring people along. You mentioned I'd been a founder before, so I had the privilege of having a few exits. And two of them were similar in that one was to Twitter and one was to Eventbrite, but at a very particular point in time, about 18 months before the IPO.
Right.
And there's a lot of things I don't understand about the IPO process. And one of them is that you have this thing that you have to file called an S1.
Right.
And this is going to tell the world why you're worth investing in.
Right.
And now in this is all of the secret sauce. How do you make money? How do you pay people? How will you make more money? And
how important is one team compared to another team?
Yeah. For Twitter, they didn't have an answer to how we make money. There's some smart people behind the scenes trying to figure all this out. But advertising, right? It's a social network. Advertising is the name of the game. But Twitter, if you got to remember, you got to go back to like 2011, 2012. This is a long time ago. It's 140 characters. It's just text. There's no photo. There's no video. They don't even own their own mobile app. They're just about to acquire one from called Tweety. I think they just bought TweetDeck. So like, there's no promoted post. There's no ad unit within the tweet yet because there's not even an image within a tweet, right? Like you can't even put a photo. You have to use something called TwitPic. And so we even kind of forget like why people are like, why would Twitter want to buy you? It's like, oh, well, it turns out we were really good at understanding mobile and interactive components in mobile and building around that. And we had built the first plugin to the app that Twitter buys called Tweety that did photos within Tweety. So it's not the whole reason, but what was important was Twitter's going to go public. Twitter needs to show how to make money. Twitter needs to do advertising. Twitter needs to figure out like a lot of interactive components around mobile and mobile development.
Right.
But it starts to all piece together. I think like now when I think about like how to articulate back to my team, it's like, okay, there's some really big components to really complicated things like IPOs and S1s that like a lot of people aren't privy to. When we can sort of remove the curtain, I think it gets people excited and energized. And I think you and I talked about this. The byproduct of this is you get a team who wants to like just naturally inherently work harder, faster, because they're like, they're invested.
Yes.
Right? You're not just showing up to a job to do work in which you are compensated for, which I get like that's the math. And that's the bare minimum. But I want, and I respect that, but I want somebody who's like, they almost can't turn it off because they're so excited.
Yes.
It's like, I want to do this. I want to build this. I want to be a contributing factor to this thing going out.
It gets them closer to being the founder who has that natively every single breath they take, right? Yeah. The anecdote you shared, though, makes me feel something about tech right now that I feel is happening. The feeling of like a teammate not understanding something and punishing a company in small ways or big ways. Consumers are starting to do it now too, where I think when business models aren't understood, companies struggle to defend themselves in the moments in which they're challenged. So Facebook is the best example of this around like, oh, what does it mean that they sell your data? And Facebook has done a terrible job of owning the story of like, well, when we sell your data, and they've tried to do this, we don't literally sell that you're this age and you're this weight. An advertiser comes to our platform and they have parameters and filters, and they use those parameters and filters to target you, but on our platform. So they don't get your line item, but they get to advertise to you because of your line item. But because they've never articulated that, they're not comfortable articulating that, and it creates this mystery around, oh, you must sell my data. I think companies need to get better, and consumers, I'll say consumers part of this in a sec, companies need to be more honest up front about here's how we make money, here's what we make money off of, you should know this as a consumer, as a teammate, whatever, so that you can be, a part of this partnership. And consumers need to give companies more room. I go back to the Google example with when they were generating images with DALL-E a couple months ago, where like if you ask for US presidents, you just get black US presidents.
People were saying that the algorithm went too far to the left versus too far to the right.
And they blamed the employees. And they were like, oh, Google is this woke, that. When the reality is there's some PM who was like, I don't want it to be that when you type show me a nurse, it's always a white female nurse. Yeah. And that is actually virtuous.
Good intentions there.
Consumers though, and this was some politically motivated people too, but consumers in general didn't give Google any leash. I think it's a bad thing. I think the idea that like a company can't make these small mistakes or explain themselves, all of that essentially cuts off the ability for that company to A, iterate as fast, release as fast, B, feel like they can share more moving forward. Because to our whole point here, the more you can bring the teammate along, the consumer along, the more everybody is rooting for the end vision that you as a founder are trying to build.
Yeah. And I just again, it's this optimist versus pessimist. Let them cook. Like let Apple, if they want to come up with a Vision Pro, I don't care if you think it looks dumb. I mean, I think the tethered battery pack is horrible, but like, I want to know what comes next of this. Right? This is the beginning of, and maybe it won't be Apple that wins, and maybe it'll be the next Palm Pilot where like they were too early. But I remember in 16, 17, these little things came out. And I remember in San Francisco seeing people, you looked ridiculous. Now it's like, you're cool. It's almost like with Starbucks, like when, again, you gotta be over the age of 30, but like when people first started walking around with that white cup with the brown sleeve, it became a status symbol overnight. Now it's like, oh, we all have Starbucks. But like these things, like they became like normalized really quick. But in the beginning, walking around San Francisco, it's like, you all look ridiculous.
And it's the moment that people look ridiculous that I think like you most have to understand why. Because let's take a look, for example, at the earbuds, which now might be how AI enters our life in a big way, because these are always in our ear thing. I mean, they already have gained popularity and acceptance to your point, and yet it still might be the earliest days of Bluetooth in your ear at all times devices. It actually might be the next platform after, we have all these chatbots, now we're getting audio. Whether Sam Altman is investing in, kind of audio-only devices right now behind the scenes at OpenAI and kind of building the future, this was an entry into a new user experience modality. It's very likely the Humane Pin, which, again, as a user who's bought one as an early adopter, I can say, I think it's admirable they built it, not useful, but a laser ink display coming off of my shirt might one day be really interesting if someone else or them figures out a better way. We have to accept V1s. We have to accept V1s.
And like, I get so, it's like sometimes visceral when people like, they get upset about something like the release of ChatGPT or like, hey, what's going to happen with the AGI? But like, I truly believe when Sam Altman says, listen, we just were like, it was like a toy ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Like, yes, GPT-3, 3.5, 4.0, like these are like massive things where that's where their teams focus on. But this was just like it was an experiment
release preview,
to see how people would use it.
Yeah.
And they didn't, but the reality there, and this is what I truly do believe, is they had no idea how we would use it. They didn't know if we would use it to try to put screenwriters out of jobs or, displace web designers. And so I think when they started seeing like, oh, wow, people are using it for legal tech. And again, this is
why he says he wants to release some of the new stuff more slowly to see how people acclimate and use it so they can better adapt.
Because it seems, to us, it's so obvious. Well, of course, you were going to put your lease agreement in there and ask if it was up to snuff or if it breaks any law. It's obvious after it exists.
Yes.
But the day it comes out, it's not the first. It's some people, it was the first thing they put in there.
Right.
But like, I don't think it would have been obvious to a group of data scientists and programmers that are building this new massive technology. Like, this is how people are going to use things, right? I don't think they thought in the beginning, it's like, oh yeah, what if you had like AI generated feet photos and you had like, Gen AI OnlyFans? Like, I don't think that was going through Altman's head, but like, here we are, maybe that ends up what's happening.
So let's get into how have you solved for some of what we talked about in terms of storytelling? How have you brought people along? What are you trying?
I try to move slower. I try to talk slower. I can talk really fast. I've learned the older I get, sometimes the more diverse my audience is. I get more of an international audience. And if I'm speaking to a group of non-native English speakers, I know I got to go a lot slower, a lot clearer. And that's hard for me naturally. Because I also get a lot of positive feedback where people are saying, oh, you sound like you're so passionate. So I talk fast. It's an illusion. But with my team, I cheat a little. I tend to keep the same folks around, which can be dangerous. But we know how to work together now.
They understand you.
Yeah.
They can maybe make some guesses as to where you're going, why you're distracted on a given day.
I use them to help fill in the blanks for me.
Right.
When I'm not.
Translators are so important inside an organization. They're people who serve as translators for the rest of the org.
Yeah, that's exactly. I never thought about that word. Yeah. That's right.
Wow. What about the notion of when you are doing the jumping around thing that founders often do? I think that's the hardest part of this for people to understand, when a shiny object seems completely unrelated and you don't want to distract them so much, but you want to make sure that once they are seeing that you're spending effort here and spending more resources, they don't feel burned on the hand or like, oh, why is this Why is this new focus taking away from what I think is important at the organization? That feels sticky.
So a lot of this, I think we have to remember that for founders, a lot of us, this is a natural way of operating.
Right.
And for our team, this idea of pivots, quick pivots is not natural. And so
or acceptable failures.
Yeah. So I need to sit down and be like, hey, it is okay to break things and to fail.
Yeah.
And so you will not lose your job. This one is contentious. I live under the camp of I pick my team over my customer. Mm-hmm. So you dropped the ball, you sent an error message, we lost the customer. Okay, there's more customers. There's not a whole lot of you. I'm picking you. And if a customer comes to me and says, hey, what Bobby did was FY, blah, 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 like fire him or I'm leaving, like,
goodbye.
Nice to have you.
Yeah.
Take
customer is almost
never
never
right. I need my team
right.
to know that that's true, right? I need my team to know that's true.
Same thing on priorities. I don't know if you apply the same, but like I have teammates, because again, unlike founders, they don't understand acceptable failure. And so they're like, I didn't finish my priorities for a day. And I go, you did so much today. I know your list was longer because when we started the day, we were ambitious. But by the way, you accomplished so much today that you're successful today.
Yeah.
Don't look at the list. Understand that there's something bigger.
What I want is these kind of annoyings, like, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Hey, are we on the right path? Are we on the right path? And then having a team that's comfortable knowing, hey, we've got to switch gears. And we should not have egos about our strategy and our plan. Like, I don't know anything for certain.
Yes.
I've got really strong conviction.
Yes.
So like, you all need to be, yes, I'm the leader and you've signed up to my vision, but like, I need to be able to tell you all that like, I was wrong.
Right.
We need to reassess. And sometimes it's a bad wrong and it's a big reassessment.
Everything is probabilistic for a founder. I think that's the other thing that it's hard for teammates sometimes to adjust to. But even the most strongly convicted feelings we have, we're usually the ones going 98% right. And I can articulate very clearly the 2% outcome and why it would happen and what that would mean and all the lessons. But most of us think very probabilistically.
I think teams forget our job as the founder or the leader or the CEO is to go forward with conviction.
Yes.
So you're going to hear me talk to customers or talk to investors, and I am going to speak as though there is no way in which I'm wrong.
I have to,
right? And I think they forget that. It's like, hey, there are two conversations going at any time. The sales pitch, the vision pitch, and then the reality. And the reality is I'm scared shitless. I have no freaking idea. You are going to build something that's going to help me figure this out. We're going to A/B test it. We're going to learn along the way. We're going to make all these pivots. And then we will figure out the deviation between where we are and where we end up.
Love it. Let's wrap our meals and go into course 3.
Okay, yeah.
All right. All right. Time for some drinks, Marty.
I'm ready. These look delicious.
All right.
Please.
Great.
Nice and refreshing for the summer.
Thank you very much.
Smell the aroma. I love it.
This is the paper plane.
Yeah, that's the paper plate.
One of my favorites.
Okay, sir.
Thank you very
Salud.
much.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Oh, here we go, Marty. To agree. That's delicious.
It's very good.
Have to say.
And I don't know if the camera can see it, but this looks fantastic.
I'm even going to break the fourth wall here and show off this tiramisu. We're both tiramisu people.
Yeah.
I'm going to guess this is going to be a tiramisu that both of us can vouch for.
Say don't judge a book by its cover, but judging, this is going to taste
listening
good.
is key here.
Yeah.
And real shout out to Paul and Jimmy's Restaurante. Just fantastic service, fantastic food. The cocktails look amazing, taste amazing, smell amazing. So if you are in New York City, again, breaking the fourth wall, Paul and Jimmy's Restaurante, check it out. Our friends over there will hook you up. Third course of 3 Course Founders is fueled by commentary from founder friends of yours. So we've heard from some of your founder friends, and
this is trouble.
This is trouble. This is where we get to some fun questions, and we'll take them where they might lead you, because it ultimately is also about your own response to what has been said.
All right, so the camera knows I had no prep on this.
Exactly.
So here we go.
We keep it to same day too, to make sure there is absolutely no prep. One of your founder friends says that if you were to have any career other than what you're doing today with Agree or as a kind of serial entrepreneur, you should be a theoretical physicist. And I want to know, why do you think a friend of yours might have said you should be a theoretical physicist?
I have no idea. Well,
some of these are hard to explain.
Maybe it's the theoretical part, right? Like the envisioning a world that doesn't exist today based on breaking past the constraints that are here.
You do break, and you also are very good at articulating kind of the math or mechanics behind a lot of different workflows, a lot of different business problems.
But it's hard to see, I think it's the hardest thing about innovation is you have to see past what isn't right in front of you. I think for most of us, that is very difficult. It's like, things work a certain way. To ask for them not to work that way, to ask for a world that doesn't exist yet, to want something that you've never had before, like that's kind of tough. I mean, there's some things where like science fiction, you can talk about like flying cars and stuff like that, but that's just like the car plus the airplane. Like to think of something, brand new, like that's hard.
When you said it earlier that a lot of what you love is the sort of aggregation, amalgamation products, like putting disparate things together.
Yeah.
And you're doing that with Agree in a big way with both the, kind of contracts portion of it and the payments portion of it. And again, to understand underlying parts allows you to see what could be differently combined.
There's this guy that a lot of people are not familiar with named Roger Bannister. And he's the first person, I think it's to break the 4-minute mile. And it was considered to be impossible. Humans can't do it. Humans can't do it. And no one had ever done it in history, right? Like tens of thousands of years of human evolution, and no one's ever done the mile this quickly. Roger comes along, does it. But what's fascinating to me isn't what Roger does. It's that 2 weeks later, the next person does it. 3 weeks later, 4 weeks, 5 weeks. I think it was about a decade later, the first high school student does it, right? So as soon as we know that it is possible, right, then it becomes possible. But that first person needs to do, like, for him to think after 10,000 years of humans, like he's going to be the one, and that's ridiculous. But once he does it, it's like, oh yeah, of course. Like anybody,
this is
all
such
people
the
can do.
founder story.
You just have to train hard, and you have to prepare yourself. You have to eat healthier. But if you do it, you can do this, right? First person to summit Everest, right? Like impossible until it happens. Now it's a tourist attraction.
Sometimes it's the joke of who's the first person to have like taken something from the wild and rubbed it on themselves.
To eat that, you see an animal, you're like, who ate that?
Yeah,
Who's the first one to like,
who thought
like,
that was a good idea?
Yeah, like who put a mussel in their mouth? It's like that's it. Like let's eat mussels.
It's so true, but it's also the founder motion of it that I think is like I find very true. People who get very close to founders and organizations, let's say they're a second or third hire, they're chief of staff, and they see the patterns, they're so much more likely to follow that path, and they can do it really quickly compared to the person who has no context. So this is why I think we often see like a consulting founder sometimes rightly get looked down upon by VCs. That doesn't mean all of them are going to be bad, but the disadvantage someone like that has is they haven't gotten exposure to what's possible. Yeah. And this is often where you hear them really, they're default negative and pessimistic on an idea because they haven't been exposed to what's possible versus people who are around founders all the time, around startups in their earliest stages. They go, oh, I've seen a lot of things happen in very short timelines with very few resources. I now believe almost anything is possible.
Well, and with theoretical physics, maybe this is why they said it. I think one of the things that's I'm far from a theoretical physicist. So some people that are closer are going to be like, Marty, you have no idea what you're talking about with the statement. So asterisk on that one. But you're talking about something that you can't prove possible right now. And then you kind of go forward with this like blind hope.
Right.
And so I think a lot of entrepreneurship is that.
Right. It is the suspension of disbelief.
Yeah.
At least for a moment, because then you have to bring it to some market reality.
Yeah.
Delicious drink.
Yeah.
Let me go to the second one.
While you do that, I'm going to carve myself a piece of this.
Yes. The tiramisu that is taunting us both. Do you own any Kraft Heinz stock and why?
I don't know why they would ask. So I do, but not in like a funny conversational way.
The prompt for this was, this is our bonus question. Is there anything you think we should ask Marty, knowing the audience for this pod is other founders and early stage employees and operators?
I can talk a lot about Kraft Heinz.
Why?
Yeah, but so the reason I own the stock, if anyone cares about stocks, is there's a few people who have said nuggets for investing advice that I never let leave my head. One of them, everyone likes to make fun of Jim Cramer. He's always wrong about everything. But in 2000, I think it was 9, I think is when he coins the term FANG.
Right.
But I'm just
coined FANG?
He coined FANG.
Jim Cramer.
Jim Cramer.
That is a fun fact.
Yeah.
And surprising.
I'm watching Mad Money when he does it, and he's just explaining. And one of the things he says is that, like, hey, he'd said, like, I use all of these companies. I use Facebook, I use Apple, I use Netflix, Amazon, and I use them every day. And he kind of said something to the effect, now it's been, so long that I've misremembered how it actually went down. But what I remember is he says something to the effect of like, when I'm done using these every day, I will sell. But until then, like, that just makes, and I was like, that makes sense. I'm kind of addicted to these 5 companies right now. Like I'm constantly on them. So yeah, and I had little to no money. Let me take whatever little money I have, put them in. Every one of those, I'm up over 1,000%.
Right.
Like I'm no Warren Buffett, but like my little FANG, when Jim Cramer told me to invest in FANG, is well outperformed anything Buffett's ever done.
As you age,
that's wild.
it is likelier to falter when you're no longer able to predict the future.
To his original advice, I noticed like I'm never on Facebook. Now I like Instagram. I'm never on Facebook. So I started selling my shares in Facebook. I spend less time on Netflix than I do Apple TV and other places. So I've started selling my positions in Netflix. So I've stayed with that. Warren Buffett once, back to Heinz, he once said, hey, there's good times and there's bad times. The one thing that's consistent is that these staples, Coca-Cola, Kraft macaroni and cheese, ketchup, they don't change. And he says in bad times, they actually go up. In good times, they stay consistent. So they're safe bets. He called them like staple stocks or something to that effect. And I was like, oh, again, I don't know a whole lot about investing, but the logic is sound. Okay, I'm gonna, as a diversification, let me buy some of these staple stocks as a way to like hedge risks for some of my crazier tech stock investments. But with Heinz, what I like is I like thinking about certain categories of like, how will AI disrupt ketchup, Lunchables, Kraft macaroni and cheese, right? Like that's fascinating to me because if you can crack that, everything else in tech becomes so much B2B SaaS sales, Gong, Salesforce. Tell me how generative AI is going to disrupt Kraft Heinz. Then we can work backwards from that. So probably my buddy Will, because we've done some thinking on this, because what we did, this was fun. We said, okay, here's a fun one. If I'm going to mess up, I want to use some vulgar language, I'm going to fuck Kraft Heinz up with generative, how would I do it? Okay, what's going on? What's out there? Who are they not afraid of that they should be afraid of? All these direct-to-consumer brands, all these influencers making their own versions of ketchup or whatever, they're like, they're never gonna be Heinz 57. So they're not taking them seriously, which is fine. But them and Coca-Cola, they live on like their secret sauce. So I was like, okay, Will. That's why I think it's Will. I got an idea. I bet ChatGPT is really good at this. And we didn't know. So I went to the grocery store and I bought, Chick-fil-A sells a Chick-fil-A sauce at the grocery store now. You can buy it yourself. Yeah. So I went and bought it. It's like another like secret sauce, I went on the back and they've got all the ingredients, right? So I took a picture, I gave it to ChatGPT and I said, tell me what I need to do to go buy in with specific measurements to how to, and then tell me how to make this, right? And there it was. So I was like, okay, well,
the reverse engineering.
Again, the bottle's like $3.49 to do everything's like $27. So, but I want to know what's possible. Right?
Yeah.
So get in there. I'm no chef, but like pretty darn close.
Pretty close.
But it means there's no more secret sauce, right? No more secret sauce is gone. So that means that Kraft Heinz, whoever is producing Chick-fil-A sauce, you're going to need something else. Like those things are gone.
It's funny. It's AI, it's disruption, but it also is going to showcase the power of brand and brand loyalty and trust.
So I went down a rabbit hole with this, and Facebook's got some image recognition that they're doing now where they can take a picture of food and they can tell you everything that's in it and how to make it. And they have this thing called the paella test. This is the paella is apparently the most difficult food to like, it's the most complex visually. And so once they can take a picture of paella and know what goes in it, like they've cracked it, but they're not there yet, but they can take a picture of a cookie and tell you if it has almonds or walnuts, if it's blue chocolate chips, whatever. They can do it with pancakes. They didn't know if it's bananas or chocolate chips or blueberries. I'm like, that's wild to me where we're at.
This is the first time that I've had a conversation about how AI is going to disrupt ketchup.
I know.
I love it.
But these are I think these are important conversations where, yes, I'm totally focused on like signatures and money movement and like I'm in this fintech space, but no, I need to have these deviations creatively just to stay entertained. But like, it gets me thinking about the applications and uses of new and emerging technologies in different ways.
Totally. The thing that I want to add to the founders that asked, and we'll wrap with this, it's been, by the way, a fantastic 3 course founders. I've enjoyed every single course of it. I want to know, when I chat with you, I don't know if I strike you this way, but I feel a similarity in terms of we don't like to leave things well enough alone. And we talked about this in terms of the theoretical physicist in you, and we talked about it earlier in terms of business model and trying to poke at things. But I want to know what you think is the downside of that. Do you feel as a founder, as someone who's seen all these businesses, as someone who can poke holes and turn things, has it had a negative effect? Not maybe from a personal standpoint, maybe true, but do you think there's a weakness in you as a founder that comes from your strength too?
Well, I think this is like the difference between first-time founders and experienced founders. It's hard to stay focused because there's a million things, especially right now. And this is one where I'm going to say it and be like, yeah, it's true today, but it's always been true. It just feels like the world is moving so fast.
Yeah.
That was true when the personal computer came out. It's true when the internet came out. Like
it's relative.
I've
and so
always felt like
true.
this. But yes, I get it's faster now. It's accelerating quicker. Before it was in decades, and then it was in half decades. Now it feels like it's every 5 months. So staying focused, knowing that like still the logic is it's about a 10-year cycle from inception to IPO or whatever the big grand exit is. Imagine 10 years of your life hyper focused on one problem set when there's so much going on. If you were to hop around, and this is where you see kind of the inexperienced founder, this is the person that in 2019 is like a fintech founder. In 2021, they're a Web3 founder. In 2023, they're an AI founder. So it just means that, AI will still be hot in 2026, but this founder is going to be a something else founder in 2026. So they have no focus. But hey,
today hardware is hot for a few months.
Guy or gal is 24, like, do it, man. You're young, bounce around. I don't care. But like my first startup, like a lot of these success stories, they seem like they're overnight successes. And then again, I'm not an overnight success, but the small successes I've had, like the first company, it's like 7 years. 7 years. Like I had fun the entire time, but 7 years, like doing one kind of thing, it's exhausting. And then some of the other ones, they're like 4 years or 6 years. Like, and then even if we get acquired, like when we did the Eventbrite thing, I think it's 4 years before Eventbrite, and then I'm with Eventbrite for it's 7 years again that I'm doing event ticketing. Like, thankfully, I got out at 2019, right before a global pandemic hits, and the last thing you want to do is buy an event ticket. But like 7 years, just selling, taking 2% of a ticket. Like, so it kind of eats away at your soul for a little bit. In the beginning, it's fun. Like, oh yeah, Eventbrite, they suck. We're going to destroy them. It's like, oh, I'm on the inside. I'm going to fix them. And it's like,
But I love everything you just said, because I feel like it is also my similar weakness. And sometimes you are looking left and right and you're like, how do I agitate my own idea? And you're like, maybe it's good enough sometimes.
Yeah.
And for you, people like you and me, the impatience, because we can see all these other opportunities, can sometimes cause you to over-agitate, over-analyze, over-cannibalize, or get literally distracted. So it's a great point. And so
it's my number one flaw is impatience. Even as you're speaking, I'm self-aware. All I want to do is, not to be rude, I want to interrupt you, but because you just said something and I want to build off of it. But I'm like literally biting my tongue of, Marty, shut the F up. Let the gentleman finish. There'll be plenty of time to speak. But I literally have to say that to myself in my head. Like I'm sitting here like...
And to be honest, the truth is sometimes the world just needs to move a little bit faster. And if people like us weren't doing that, there are people who slow it down, and that's good to keep that other side of things. There are people who are paced, that's great. And there are people who need to agitate things, and that adds to it too. It's all about getting every flavor, getting integrated. Same thing we think about with our businesses. It's like, how do you get all the signal in the world?
Geographic proximity. One, I am not actually a believer, it's a hot take, but you can build a startup anywhere. I mean, you physically actually can, but the acceleration velocity of being surrounded around people that move at this speed, that's rare, right? And it happens, unfortunately, within large metropolitan cities. There's like 2 or 3 in which are the most popular. And then the 2 most popular are still San Francisco and New York City. And what I've noticed, the differences that I appreciate about them, in San Francisco, you're surrounded by builders. They're constantly building. And I mean actual finger to keyboard, like programmers, developers. So the use and the application of a technology in a way you never would have thought before, it's just It's in every coffee shop, in every conversation. And you might find that annoying and like think that that's the worst thing. From a builder's perspective, I love it. I want to overhear, I want to eavesdrop on every coffee conversation. In New York, a little bit more of a grower sort of marketer mindset, less like a lot of programmers here, but just, ratio, not as many as San Francisco, but the speed and the velocity.
Yes.
Now, I think we're all like used to this like break fast and move things mantra of move fast and break things of San Francisco. And like those startups do move fast, but I don't think they actually move as fast. Now, I think they seemingly do because the technology they're working with is smarter, better, more advanced. But like, I think the actual speed of execution that I see in New York, and that's just, we all make
go-to-market startups do better here versus product startups do better in San Francisco.
And we all make this joke that like, you're in a coffee shop in New York City and like, you're not ready to order by the time you get to that register, like they will move you, like the barista will move you out of the line, the person behind you will move you out of the line. Like
my sister lives in Nashville, and whenever I visit, and last time I visited, I decided, I wanted to just stay. I've had a busy couple months. I'm going to stay in a hotel rather than stay at her house. And I land and I want to get into my room early, and I call, and the receptionist just had this long thing about the weather in New York is this, and the weather in Nashville is this. Welcome. I hope you're going to have a great stay, blah, blah, blah. And the entire time I'm going, when are you going to stop talking? Let me ask my question. I just can't do this anymore. Marty, this has been fantastic.
It's been awesome.
Thanks so much for doing 3 Course Founders. Really appreciate it. We appreciate your insights for all founders.
I appreciate the tiramisu and the conversation.
And the conversation. All fantastic. Where can people find you if they want to follow you, agree on the journey? Twitter.
It's Marty Madrid. Get that follower count up, please. I need all the help I can get.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Marty, great conversation.
Thank you again.
I just really like this drink.
It's so good. Paper plane. I love it.
This can be B-roll. I'll stop.